Welcome everyone. In this episode, we are taking a look at famous authors who grew to hate the books that made them successful. If you're interested in this sort of content, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Let's begin with arguably the most famous example on this list. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the Sherlock Holmes series. This man is responsible for arguably the most famous detective stories in the world. I'm talking, of course, about Sherlock Holmes. The first story, A Study in Scarlet, was published in 1887. The character of Sherlock Holmes has been reimagined hundreds of times, from plays to cartoons such as The Great Mouse Detective, and even modernized with television shows like House. I am embarrassed to say that I didn't notice the connection when I was growing up. House, Holmes, Watson, Wilson, antisocial, hyper-intelligent protagonist with drug dependencies. You get the idea.
Got it.
Start counting. How many?
26.
Okay. Either you suck at math, or you're gonna die in 2 seconds. You suck at math.
Sherlock Holmes has been adapted into film and radio many times, which is why it might surprise you to learn that Doyle grew to absolutely despise the character. This series was so popular that both his publisher and the public wanted nothing else from him, despite his wishes to abandon the series and write other historical novels. Doyle got so sick of writing the detective novels that he even tried to kill Holmes off in The Final Problem, but was forced to relent and bring the character back due to overwhelming pressure from his publisher, leaving him worn down and frustrated. The last Sherlock Holmes book, The Adventures of Shoshcombe Old Place, was published in 1927. For those of you who are doing the quick math, that's 40 years of writing about a character this man grew to hate. Anthony Burgess, A Clockwork Orange. Published on January 1st of 1962, A Clockwork Orange was intended as a political satire set in a dystopian world. Its author, Anthony Burgess, didn't exactly hate A Clockwork Orange, but he did end up regretting his decision to write it. Whilst he acknowledged its success, he grew frustrated by two things: misinterpretations about the book and its themes, and being overshadowed. The book's violent content was often seen as a way to glorify violence, which was not Burgess' intention at all. Additionally, the immense popularity of Stanley Kubrick's film adaptation released in 1972 overshadowed the novel itself, leaving Burgess feeling like he wasn't getting proper credit for his own work. "The misunderstanding of the novel will pursue me until I die," he wrote in his 1985 biography of D. H. Lawrence, Flame into Being. Stephen King, Rage. Stephen King has written over 50 books in his lengthy career and is one of the most recognized horror writers in the world. But did you know that there was a book that he once pulled from print? That book is Rage, first published in 1977, but has been out of print for over 20 years. Rage, written under the pseudonym of Richard Bachman, tells the story of Charlie Decker, a troubled high school student. After getting expelled, Charlie returns to his school, shoots his algebra teacher, and holds the rest of his classmates hostage. The tense standoff reveals Charlie's simmering rage and delves into the secrets and fears of his captive classmates. Unfortunately, this book was associated with some very real high school shooting incidents in the 1980s and 1990s, where in each incident, a copy of the book was found in the locker of the shooter, with one of the perpetrators having even written an essay on it. King was so horrified by this that he had the book pulled from print, where it remains out of print to this day. Alan Alexander Milm, Winnie the Pooh. Milm wrote the childhood classic of many, Winnie the Pooh, and his feelings on the book became rather complicated. Christopher Robin Milm was not just a character from the children's book, but a real person, the author's own son. and though he enjoyed the books at first, the popularity of the stories soon began to affect him in real life. He was still a child and in school at the time and was mercilessly bullied for his connection to the stories. As an adult, Christopher struggled to find work. The young man became angry and disillusioned with the world, and his relationship with his father further deteriorated. The intense public scrutiny and the subsequent impact on Christopher Robin's life caused his father significant distress, and the man refused to write another Winnie the Pooh story after the fourth book was released. Peter Benchley, Jaws. Jaws has become a name that most people recognise even if they've never read the book or watched the movie. The thriller about a shark terrifying a town had incredible success, both as a novel and then later when it was brought to the big screen by Steven Spielberg, which is why it may surprise you to hear that the author, Peter Benchley, later expressed deep regret for his creation. Benchley became increasingly troubled by the public's fear and misunderstanding of sharks that the book fostered. He dedicated much of his later life to shark conservation efforts, attempting to rectify the negative impact his work had on these misunderstood creatures. The immense pressure and responsibility that came from being the author of such a culturally influential work also contributed to his disillusionment and eventual hatred of the story. D Salinger and The Catcher in the Rye. Many authors are excited by the prospect of their books doing well. Strangely, this wasn't the case for D Salinger, author of The Catcher in the Rye. The novel is an all-time classic in coming-of-age literature, an allegory to teenage alienation, capturing the deeply human need for connection and the bewildering sense of loss as we leave childhood behind. Published in serial form from 1945 to 46, the story was then novelized in 1951. Salinger retreated from public life after the overwhelming success of The Catcher in the Rye. He became increasingly reclusive and reportedly disliked the attention and the scrutiny that came from the novel's popularity. "I'm tired of being collared in elevators, stopped on the street, and of interlopers on my private property," said an elderly Salinger during a rare interview. "I want to be left alone, absolutely. Why can't my life just be my own?" Annie Proulx and Brokeback Mountain. Brokeback Mountain is one of those films that you likely know of even if you've never seen it. But did you know that it was a book long before it was ever brought to the big screen? Originally published in 1997 as a short story, Brokeback Mountain was very well received. It even won the National Magazine Award for Fiction in 1998. Unfortunately, the author wasn't so happy with its success as you might think. "Misreadings have only multiplied," Annie Proulx explained, since the release of the 2005 live-action film adaptation, which resulted in most ardent fans sending her more hopeful endings and suggestions for perceived improvements. "I wish I'd never written the story," Proulx told the Paris Review. "It's just been the cause of hassles and problems and irritation since the film came out. So many people have completely misunderstood the story." Vladimir Nabokov and Lolita. Whilst Lolita is now considered a classic, Nabokov himself had a complex relationship with the novel, and the public's perception of him as a result. The controversy lies with the character of Hubert and his complete infatuation with Dolores Hayes, who he calls Lolita. Unfortunately, this girl is only 12 years old. The book is told from his perspective, and though many readers enjoyed Vladimir's use of descriptive language and artful creation of scenes, many couldn't get past the creepy, predatory behaviour of Hubert. There's no getting around it. He is ultimately an abuser. Vladimir never actually expected the book to even be published, let alone popular, where it is still heavily discussed and scrutinized to this day. Ian Fleming, The Spy Who Loved Me. James Bond is one of the most iconic spies in the modern world. This character has been adapted into film no less than 27 times as of September 2024. Ian Fleming, the author of the spy novels, regarded James Bond not as a heroic figure, but only as an efficient professional in his own job. He never intended for Bond to be idolized or used as a role model. For those who don't know, many of the books were considered problematic for their incredibly misogynistic tone, which is why it might surprise you to know that The Spy Who Loves Me was written from the perspective of a woman. It was also, hilariously, a book that Fleming grew to hate. He wrote it specifically to be used as a cautionary tale about Bond, and was both annoyed and disappointed by the terrible reviews the book received upon release. He was in fact so disappointed that he insisted that it never be reprinted after its initial release. We've made it to the end of today's video. Can you think of any other authors who grew to dislike their own work? Have you ever had this experience yourself with your own writing? Thanks for sticking around. Until next time.